had one of the first houses I renovated. It was done by somebody who's like, hey, for this budget, I just can't make it work. So I went searching real hard for a contractor that would do it within budget to save some money up front. And he was like, oh yeah, I can do this, no problem. But he didn't do any of the plumbing to code.
What was your most successful real estate investment?
My most successful real estate investment was this 1,500 square foot house on Grandview Drive in Indianapolis that was next to a property I was already flipping. And I noticed that there was a big tree that fell down, and through the entire project of renovating the house 2 doors down, I never saw anyone come in or out of this house, and I never saw anyone come and look at that tree. And so I looked it up and I called a few numbers that were dead end, and I just couldn't quite get a hold of anyone. I rang the doorbell, again, nobody actually answered. And I think it was the best one because I dug deeper than the first level of data. And I actually skip traced the property owner. I researched some of the numbers that were dead, and then I found out who those were previously registered to and figured out, well, who else is related to that person, and was able to finally get in touch with the property owner. And she was working with her daughter an hour away, and almost kind of permanently moved there to help her daughter, care for her kids. I think her daughter might have gotten a divorce. And she was so anxious when I told her about the tree that fell in front of her property. And I was telling her I could help her out by just buying her house if she did want to move, and she wouldn't have to worry about the tree at all. So a few weeks passed, I stayed in touch with her, and she ended up wanting an offer. And so I gave her an offer for $65,000, and we put in about $45,000 to clean up the tree and fix up the kitchen and update the bathroom. The house today is worth $200,000, and it rents out for about $1,900 per month. And it's almost all totally redone, so there's virtually no maintenance for the next 10 years. And I would say that is my most successful real estate investment so far.
What type of real estate investment has the highest ROI?
So wholesaling, you could get a lot of short-term cash. Buy and hold, you're gonna be a longer-term winner, I think, because let's say you find a great real estate deal and you make a quick $10,000. Maybe that's what you need at the time. But if you buy that property, you're gonna get the cash flowing rent every month. And then as time goes on, that property likely is going to appreciate way more than $10,000 over the course of years. And so I'm really focused on building a rental property portfolio instead of wholesaling or instead of quick flipping. As long as the property meets my rental criteria in my Indianapolis market, I'm seeing that as my absolute very best type of real estate investment and what I'm focused on.
How do you calculate the risks of a real estate investment?
Some of the risks in my real estate investments that I've experienced are when I was brand new, I hired some contractors that weren't maybe the best. They didn't do everything to code. And so your lack of knowledge is a bit of risk, but I would hedge that and say, you're never gonna learn by just reading books, and you're only gonna learn by taking a lot of action and being okay to learn some lessons along the way. There's not any gigantic risk, but for example, I had one of the first houses I renovated. It was done by somebody who's like, hey, for this budget, I just can't make it work. So I went searching real hard for a contractor that would do it within budget to save some money up front. And he was like, oh yeah, I can do this, no problem. But he didn't do any of the plumbing to code. And I've had some issues with that now. For example, I had a tankless water heater. We have really hard water. He didn't put in a water softener. And so within a year, the water heater was totally clogged up. It didn't work anymore. And once somebody came and flushed it, which is not that cheap, then it sent all the debris over time right after that into every single faucet, shower head, and valve. So all those had to be replaced. And the heating elements of the water heater actually needed to be replaced too, because it was working so hard and the water wasn't flowing through. So I would say that's a risk where I probably saved $20,000 up front, and now I've spent $10,000, replacing all the plumbing fixtures and whatnot. I don't think you can ever totally avoid risks, but the more rental properties you have and the more actions you take, the more you're gonna learn. So that way you can remember the mistakes you made at the first place and not make those on subsequent properties. And if you've got 9 rentals, it doesn't make spending $10,000 on one as big of a deal, because the monthly rent that I'm collecting is more than $10,000. Other ones can help absorb some of that risk because I've spread out a little bit and I've got multiple properties. That's one of the biggest risks in real estate investing that I've experienced so far. I think another one that I haven't experienced, but I've heard others talk about, is if your primary business is fixing and flipping properties, so not wholesaling, not keeping as long-term rentals. Sometimes if you find a lot of deals and you've got financing, you might take down 5 properties, 10 properties, and they're all on your books. Maybe you can't work on them all at once. And if the market hits a recession when you've got a lot of inventory on your books, you could really get hurt if the value of all those properties drops significantly before you're able to fix and flip them. And that could really hurt as well because you probably aren't renting them out either. And that could be a big risk. So if you're fixing and flipping, keep tabs on how much inventory you have that you may not be working on right now. Those are 2 different risks in real estate investing and how you could avoid them.